So we're indeed joined by Professor Peter Manuelian, who works on Egyptology here at Harvard. And among the goals for today isn't necessarily to get you to decide exactly what final projects you're going to work on, but to seed you with the first of a series of ideas and domains outside of CS and outside of engineering more generally. And what's so exciting about Peter's work is that of all the faculty I know on campus, he does such an amazing job at bringing technology to a very, very, very old field. And his work in virtual reality and restoration of artifacts with 3D printing and beyond is just wonderfully inspiring. And so the goal ultimately for today is really just that, to inspire and to get folks thinking about possible applications of CS to this world. Peter.
Fabulous. Thanks, David. And thanks, Benedict. Welcome to all of you in New Haven. Nice to see you down there. I love this concept of this course, mixing digital applications and the humanities. I'm basically a humanities guy. There's some social sciences in there too because of archaeology, and then of course on the science side too with computer science. So I'm delighted to try to mix all this stuff together. So I've been running for a long, long time, almost 18 years now, something called the Giza Project, not to be confused with Gaza. This is Giza, the Great Pyramids to the west of modern Cairo. Think about 2500 BCE. And this has a tremendous Harvard legacy based on excavations by someone named George Andrew Reisner, Harvard class of 1889. And in 1905, he brought something together called the Harvard MFA, that stands for Museum of Fine Arts Boston, expedition. And this is one of the longest running and most successful expeditions ever. It went for about 40 years and worked at 23 different sites. So everything you see in red and even off the screen down into the Sudan, ancient Nubia, were part of the sites that he worked at. But headquarters was always up at Giza. That was the most important place. So that's what we're going to focus on today. And I want to just show you a few of the ideas and challenges and technologies and exciting things we're working on. Maybe some of these will lead to some final project ideas for you, and perhaps not. We shall see. So when you're dealing with Giza, you've got all kinds of cool data sets. You've got the data set that's still out at the site. You may all know the three famous pyramids. There's no decoration inside those. Those are royal tombs for pharaohs of the 4th dynasty. But then surrounding the pyramids are hundreds and hundreds of rectangular structures called mastabas. These are tombs of non-royal people, the elites of the pyramid age. And inside many of them, you get wonderful decorations, relief carvings, paintings, inscriptions. These are the primary sources for anything you want to know about ancient Egypt. How they dressed, how they interacted, their craftsmanship, their costumes, hieroglyphic texts and grammar and funerary rituals, how they treated livestock, what their architecture looked like. It's all there in these frozen moments for us Egyptologists. And then there's the other data set that came away from Giza. First it was plunder, then it was responsible archaeology. Our HU MFA expedition worked from about 1905 to 1942 when George Reisner died at the pyramids, and he's actually buried in Old Cairo. So all this is the kind of stuff that the excavators find, and they've ended up in museums all over the world, many of them right here in Boston at the Museum of Fine Arts. And along the way, there were spectacular masterpieces as well, like this one, which is in the MFA, probably one of the top 5 sculptures from any period in all of Egyptian history. So what's the raw material that our project has been using? It's this stuff, rather unromantic looking. 21,000 glass plate expedition photographs, large size, almost letter size paper to mid-size to 4 by 5 inches. Drawings, maps and plans, architectural sections, figural drawings of wall scenes and hieroglyphic texts and other decoration. Boxes and boxes of prints and manuscripts and things, published articles and then unpublished stuff as well. So how do you take a massive archive like this from an old expedition and try to make sense out of it? Because who's got the time to get a grant to come up to Boston and open every one of those boxes? So this is our plan. This is our diagram. We start in the middle with an individual tomb called a mastaba of a single person. Maybe it's a family group. Maybe there's more than one person buried there. But then we round up everything that's related to that. So we have a SQL database. It's called TMS, the Museum System. What a romantic title, huh? It's made by a company called Gallery Systems in New York. If you're interested in museum studies or going into the museum world, I would suggest that you might want to get comfortable with TMS because it's used in 700 museums around the world. So about 2,000 fields, SQL database, pretty useful. And all of these things have to find their homes in the various media modules of the database. So for one given tomb, do a search for it and up comes, well, I have this many photographs, old excavation shots, modern color photography. I've got renderings, I've got manuscripts, I've got published books, I have new pictures, I have architectural plans and drawings, The object register, the database of its time, right, where Reisner and the team gave a sketch of every object, gave it a number, measurements, where did it come from, the archaeological provenance, new photography, drawings, everything that is related gets linked. So we chugged along doing this with the remnants or the archive of the Harvard MFA expedition for many years, and then realized it doesn't do you any good if you know everything about tomb number 1 right here, because it was dug by the Americans, but nothing about this tomb over here because the Germans excavated it or the Italians did. So we went on the road years ago and we rounded up all the big players. All of these cities and institutions dug directly at Giza, and they all got stuff. And so we signed agreements with all of them, and we got them to hand over all their photos and diaries and maps and plans and things. And of course, it never comes in the format that you want to go right into your SQL database. It's got to be massaged, so there's no end of data entry. We launched one website back in 2005. It's now been frozen since 2011. And then we've just built this new one at Harvard. It's giza.fas.harvard.edu. There it is. And it's a more modern and robust website. You can see the totals. If you just hit the go button without even typing anything, you'll get the list of everything that's in there right now, all cross-linked and hopefully intelligently referenced. This is still a work in progress, and a lot of the cooler things like saving collections and sharing them with colleagues, those things aren't quite built yet, and we want to get to those. We also want to put the page viewer in called Mirador, the IIIF page viewing system that was developed between Harvard and Stanford that lets you zoom in on images and flip through them, book-like, and annotate them and do all kinds of cool stuff. So there are a lot of things that are still coming. And then we've also moved into the 3D modeling section of the world here. So it's not just the old dig photos and the discoveries, but now we want to cruise around the site, fly over it in 3D. We want to dive down burial shafts. We want to restore things. We get views of tombs, both above ground chambers and underground chambers that we wouldn't get in any other way. Of course, we can rotate these. In this case, you see the original excavator's section drawing and plan drawing superimposed in this Studio Max file right with the 3D model, so you can compare and see how you're doing. The other variable then is avatars, right? Bringing humans in, which is always tricky, because are they dressed appropriately? Are they doing the right things? Do we know what this room is for? And are these guys doing the right stuff? It's a whole nother level of complexity and rendering. And then if you're going to get it on the web, it's pretty tricky too. So this is all moving into the same kind of large repository. We believe that Giza is one of the most important archaeological sites in the world, and it needs a center, it needs an institute. If it's not a brick and mortar structure, then at least we can get this website online. And along the way, with reconstructions, you may have played with Assassin's Creed and things like that, and you're always wondering, what's accurate, what's fantasy, what's speculation? So along the way, we're trying to get away from that Wild West concept of wondering how did that all happen, and build a system where we've got a kind of a digital paper trail. So if that wall is this high, now you know why. Well, it was excavated at 3 feet. We're speculating that it was originally 5 feet, and here's why. There's a similar building at another site that's done the same way, or it's based on this excavation report or publication. So we're trying to bring some order into the chaos of 3D modeling and reconstruction. Why do we do this stuff? Because sites like this are doomed. Here's an example, 1927, and today you can see what were beautiful engaged statues are now hurting, whether it's salts coming to the surface and leaching away the decoration, or vandalism, lopping the faces off and bringing them to the art market, all kinds of challenges. Not everyone can get to these places. The tombs are often locked or reburied or not open for public view. So visualization is another part of the project that we experiment with. Here we are actually on top of the corner of the Great Pyramid. That's why these guys are trying not to fall off as they walk around right here. And this is great fun. These are HTC Vives or Oculus Go's and other devices. I'm trying to bring this to Harvard next semester, so people in our science center might be able to have the experience of walking around on top of the Great Pyramid. And our modeling also brings up questions of restoration. So this was originally found as a deteriorated mess 100 feet underground. All the wood was deteriorated, insects, floods, all of that. But with meticulous archaeological documentation, you can then start to put things back together. So we have a 3D reconstruction visitable in our visualization lab in another classroom where I teach a Giza course. And that lets you do some cool things. Not only restore the tomb, that's what everything you just saw looked like in 1925 when the excavators got there. And it turned out to be the mother of the king who built the Great Pyramid. And here's all her funerary bedroom set. There was, however, a very complicated second chair, and no one even knew what it should look like based on this mess. But we were able to put it back together based on the original excavation records. And then the next step was to actually build it physically. So based on a computer model, our CNC router is actually carving real cedar wood and making the arms of that chair. We got real gold. We learned how to make faience tiles. And this is now an exhibit at the Harvard Semitic Museum, where I'm fortunate to be the director too, so I get to say what goes on view and what doesn't. So mixing things from the virtual world to the real world is kind of a fun exercise. It's not just a research website anymore. It's a museum exhibit piece. It's a teaching tool. And we're blending the boundaries a little bit. So here's another example. This is a famous stela that stands today still between the paws of the Great Sphinx at Giza. Talks about a prince 1,000 years after the Sphinx was carved who comes and takes a nap in the shadow of the Sphinx, and the Sphinx appears to him in a dream and says, "Dude, I'm covered in sand. If you will dig the sand out, I will make you pharaoh." And that's what this story tells you. So we wanted to make a reproduction of this in modern resin using an old plaster cast. And my creative curator is doing this very analog project here. Makes the mold, pulls away this rubbery mold, and we've got instant modern colored resin that looks just like pink granite. And we set that up in the Harvard Semitic Museum. I'd love to recreate the Sphinx, but I don't have the ceiling height. So the next thing to do is an augmented reality display. So the students can download this app. You can do it too. It's on the Apple or Google Play Store. It's called Dreaming the Sphinx. And what you do is download it. If you're in the museum, you aim at the stela and it becomes the target. And bit by bit, you can hit the next button and cycle through the English translation of all of these little pieces. If you're in New Haven, for example, you can download a 2-page PDF, aim your phone at the hieroglyphs, and the same thing will happen. That's one feature. Another is you can hit the other button and you'll actually be standing between the paws of the Sphinx, and you can look around in 360 and see what it's like to be there. Or hit the time slider and move ahead 1,000 years and see it in the Old Kingdom, in the New Kingdom, or in its present day condition today, like this. And then you can cycle around and see what it's like to stand between the paws of the Sphinx, which are out of bounds these days. Regular tourists can't get there. One other thing this display does is we experimented with floor targets. And so if you aim your phone at this floor target, up pops the Sphinx again, and once more with the chronological slider. So you can see it before that stela came 1,000 years earlier, maybe what it looked like in the Old Kingdom, then the New Kingdom when the stela comes in and a statue of the king, and then finally in its current state. So you can download this app and you can do this. It's about 150 megs, so you want to be on a good Wi-Fi connection, but it works with Android and iOS, and it's pretty stable. Just aim the phone at your hieroglyphs and you can do everything you can do in the museum. This summer, we had a portable 3D scanner that we got right here. It's an Artex Space Spider, and so we scanned the entire Egyptian collection in our museum basement this summer, about 350 objects, mostly smallish. And we've just gotten 3 of these Sindo 3D printers. Can't do gigantic things, but we're just starting to experiment with getting some of the items in our collection 3D printed. So first, the models go to Sketchfab. We hope the whole world will be able to rotate and study these objects. Maybe download and 3D print if they have access. If not, we can use these hopefully as teaching tools and bring them to class. I'm hoping to get things a little bit bigger than these little bite-sized pieces here. That's the original in this case, and I think size is everything here. Making these models is great fun. If you don't have the 3D scanner, you can do it just with photogrammetry. So take your camera, shoot 50 or 60 images of an object like this, and then use PhotoScan and stitch them all together. This is our visualization classroom, and we can rotate things all around. It's been great fun. I should also introduce our visiting professor, Dr. Changyu Dao from Zhejiang University in China. He is helping connect our class via Zoom to students in China who are actually watching our Giza class live and participating. My goal is that they're going to put on their Oculus Go headsets and we'll put on ours, and the Harvard students and the China students will meet in front of the Sphinx and we'll have a virtual lecture at Giza. That's where we're heading. So these excavations are never done. There are people working at the site now. So if you do a big project, know that it's never quite over, right? There's always stuff to add and to refine and to augment. So we're never quite up to date with our Giza project. But there are always things to be experimented with and added, and I'll just list a couple of the things that we deal with, and maybe some of these will catch your eye, and perhaps we can even help you with them. So for example, in the old website, I had this wonderful zoomable aerial photo from 1936, and I made every tomb a rollover button. So just roll over it, click on the tomb, and up pops all the related data and media. Or I wandered the site for many years, and I shot QuickTime virtual reality panoramas, these little blinking dots all over the site where you could just click the button and stand and look around. Prime example of technology going out of style, Apple does not support its own QuickTime VR technology anymore, and so most of those QTVRs are dead. They need to be converted to HTML5, replot this whole site again, and that's the kind of thing I'd like to bring back to life. I mentioned our Mirador viewer, our page viewer, which is a pretty sophisticated system, has annotatable stuff, savable stuff. That all needs to be built in, and we're working on that, getting it in our website. There are always wonderful Egyptological projects, like who owns these tombs and what are their hieroglyphic administrative titles? Can I search for them? Can I say, am I dealing with this same guy? He's named Neferhotep, he's named Neferhotep. How do I know it's the same? Well, scrape the data, see who he's married to, see who he's married to, if it's the same person, or they have the same job title, maybe you've got the same kind of person. We also have a thesaurus, and this is allowing you to look at a photograph and actually search by content. So it's a kind of a clumsy system in our old website, and it's not quite built in our new one, but we're working on that. So for example, you're doing a thesis on images of women sitting, holding a lotus blossom, you know, with musicians in the attendance. You can click all those boxes and the system will do a search for all that kind of content. Much more useful than just looking at the caption for the photo or the description that can't go into that much detail. There's always more 3D modeling to do. We're actually doing an experiment in our Giza class where every student will get a tomb, and we've teamed up with the 3D modeling company Dassault Systèmes, based in Paris and also here in Waltham, and we'll be using a new software package from them called Xdesign, and we have a special teaching assistant who will take them through the process of 3D wire framing and building, modeling, maybe even texture mapping and adding textures. So each one gets a tomb that hopefully will, if good enough, will go into our Giza tomb model. Yep, that is that project. And what else? Data mining stuff, virtual reality, augmented reality. We have one other Giza object in our Semitic Museum gallery. It's a reproduction, but it would be a pretty cool topic for augmented reality as well. So it's always a challenge to figure out what do we need, what skills do students have, the time frame you've got to do projects. You know, is there a good match there? Do we have people who can supervise? But there's no end of creative stuff we can do now. And it's not just for classroom use, it's for research by scholars. It's a real world project. It's 3D modeling and it's 3D printing, available for the public. It's museum displays in the Harvard Semitic Museum and hopefully elsewhere eventually as well. And the dream is to not just have these be empty shells, but eventually every single tomb built in the kind of detail that you saw some of the other models showing, so that you can view Giza at one period in time, or then another period of time, or dive underground and see what all this looks like with the burial shafts coming down and surrounding you. All of this helps us understand how the place developed chronologically, how it spread organically or not, chronological reconstructions, dating criteria, understanding basically ancient Egyptian culture through this lens of the most famous site, I think, in the whole Nile Valley, the Giza pyramids. So that's a whirlwind overview of what we do in our Giza project, and I think, am I on time? I'm just about on time, so I have a few minutes for questions, either from New Haven or from Cambridge. Happy to try to answer any questions.